We have some major news that dropped recently from a notable reporter highlighting that the Toronto Blue Jays are not done and that a big move could be on the horizon. And this report specifically indicates what kind of move could be coming. So we'll break that down in this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Matt Chapman. We have another update on his front, so stay tuned for that and much more coming up. What's up, Jays fans? It's Gosse here, host of Jays Digest, and we have a lot of news to discuss today. Obviously, the Jays have made a couple of big moves, Isiah Kiner-Falefa and Kevin Kiermaier, but nothing too crazy has happened yet, and according to a notable reporter, that might be about to change in the next coming days, next coming weeks, depending how long Ross Atkins takes, of course, to actually get this done. Before we do get into it, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 12,500. Thank you guys for your support. It's been unbelievable. Now let's start with this. Robert Murray was on a podcast yesterday, and he basically said a bunch of different things about a bunch of different teams. And we all know Robert Murray is a notable reporter. I believe he works at the MLB Network, but he has always been a guy who's been in tune with the Jays and kind of has supported the Jays, especially throughout the John Heyman stuff and all the disaster class reporting that was that during the Shohei Ohtani era. And he basically says that the Blue Jays aren't done by any means, and he wouldn't be surprised if they get multiple more bats. He said, "Be patient, Blue Jays fans. Ross Atkins is not done." Now, when you take this at face value, it's very interesting. He says multiple bats because we already have added 2 bats to our team. Now, I think when he's saying multiple bats, he means bats that are higher level than Kevin Kiermaier and Isiah Kiner-Falefa. Obviously, both of these guys are below average hitters, but they do other things. Kiner-Falefa is obviously more versatile, is a great defender, and Kevin Kiermaier is the best center fielder defender of our generation. But we have yet to add a major bat. And according to Robert Murray, it seems like that is going to happen very soon. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of bat this might look like, whether it's Jorge Soler, whether it's JD Martinez, whether it's another guy, is up to you and up to you to kind of speculate and think. But I think the most notable and the easiest fit right now would be JD Martinez. And we've talked about JD Martinez a ton, especially now that we brought Kevin Kiermaier back. Maybe Jorge Soler is a bit less likely because he would have been the guy who could have slotted in left field sometimes along with DH as well. And JD Martinez had an almost 900 OPS last season, and obviously he's an absolute masher. Look at the Baseball Savant page. He does strike out a lot. He doesn't walk very much, but he absolutely crushes baseballs, and he is 36 years old. It would probably take 2 years. Who knows how much it would be, maybe 10 million AAV, 15, depending on what it takes. But I think the most obvious kind of fit right now would be JD Martinez for this team. He kind of replaced the Brandon Belt role of last season, which we obviously need to replace, and we've kind of replaced the other slots on our team that we lost. Kevin Kiermaier, well, he replaces himself from last year, and then Isiah Kiner-Falefa replacing Whit Merrifield / Santiago Espinal / Matt Chapman to a degree if we don't retain Matt Chapman, which we're unsure about yet. But again, when he says multiple bats, you really start to think about how many other possible bats are there. Again, I think JD Martinez is the biggest option here and probably the best option. But again, it's up to you to think about that. Now, he had some other notable things to think about as well, and he has some other notable things to say. And again, he goes on to say that I don't know if it's going to be a Bellinger type by any means, and I don't necessarily know what they're going to end up doing, but the Teoscar Hernandez market is strong as well, and that is in reference to him mentioning that, I quote, "I even thought coming into the offseason that Teoscar could have made sense for the Jays. They have a lot of options there in the outfield for sure, but I think they have the flexibility to add another player if they wanted to," and that is another player to the outfield. Now, this would be interesting because you're obviously now, if you're looking for another outfielder that opens up a lot more space, you're looking at potentially Teoscar Hernandez, you're looking at Jorge Soler, you're looking at a lot of the outfielders, and I'm not entirely sure the Jays want to do that because that would almost make the Dalton Varsho trade look a lot worse than it already does to a degree. Moving Varsho from center to left field, he obviously provides a lot more value in center field compared to left field. But when you have a generational defender like Kevin Kiermaier, who's going to play most days, maybe not against lefties, but again, the issue is that both Varsho and Kiermaier struggle against lefties to a degree, or they're both left-handed hitters. Specifically, Varsho struggles against lefties last season. So it becomes interesting now, maybe for against left-handed hitters, they get a guy like Jorge Soler who will play every day. He'll play in left field against left-handed pitching. Varsho or Kiermaier will play center field again, on days and just kind of swap out and platoon that. And then you have a guy who can mash left-handed hitters in the outfield, and then on days against right-handed hitters, you kind of have Soler go in there, and so on and so forth. So that's very interesting. Or that case, exact same case, could also be made for Teoscar Hernandez. He could be a guy who the Jays look to bring back. We know throughout the trade deadline there was rumblings of him wanting to return to Toronto, and we covered it a lot. There was potential that they were going to trade for Teoscar Hernandez at the deadline against the Mariners, but ultimately the Mariners decided to keep him, and now he could walk for nothing. And if he ends up leaving, the Blue Jays do make a ton of sense for Teoscar Hernandez. As it says here, it could be a Teoscar Hernandez type of guy in left field if they don't want to go out and get Bellinger. I think Bellinger makes less sense at this point. We'd be running a 4-man outfield with 3 of them being left-handed hitters, so I don't think that is probably the best way to go about it. But I think ultimately, an outfielder might be on the way, but at the very least, I think a JD Martinez type of player does make the most sense for the Toronto Blue Jays, both now and going forward, if you are looking at potential acquisitions for the rest of the season. Like Robert Murray seems to think, as in very, very soon, because obviously we know moves are starting to heat up now. The Jays have made 2 moves in the past 4 days, and I suspect they make some more very, very soon. Now, I do want to throw this in before we get into the Matt Chapman stuff. He kind of mentions, and they asked about why the Blue Jays gave Isiah Kiner-Falefa a second year on his contract, and it basically said that numerous teams were willing to give him a second year, and he was one of the more surprisingly coveted players on the market. And if you actually listen to it, he basically goes on to say that the Jays love what he does. They think they can unlock something else in his hitting. We saw with the Yankees last year, he aimed for more power. He got it a little bit. He finished with a 270-ish average, well below 700 OPS, which is well below league average. But the point is, if the Jays can think they can unlock something with Isiah Kiner-Falefa, and that contract might end up being a steal. Obviously, that's a lot to ask from a guy who's never hit above a 700 OPS in a full season. That being said, he is a phenomenal defender. That basically, what Robert Murray said is the Jays love what he can do at any position. He's a Gold Glove third baseman, so if they don't bring Matt Chapman back, he could be the guy who plays third base. Obviously, being an everyday third baseman is probably not the best route for the Blue Jays if it's Isiah Kiner-Falefa that doesn't really scream World Series contender. But it is interesting to know, and that is why they gave him a second year. They weren't the only team who was going to give him a second year. Numerous teams did, and we'll see how the contract ages, but the Jays outbid someone, and it wasn't for Shohei Ohtani, it wasn't for Yoshinobu Yamamoto. It was ultimately for Isiah Kiner-Falefa, which is a little bit funny, but it is what it is there, and just wanted to throw that in there. Now, before we wrap up, let's quickly bring this up. Apparently, Murray says there is a lot of connection behind the scenes between the Giants and Matt Chapman, and nothing is imminent. Now, this kind of maybe want to bring up the conversation of, does Matt Chapman, I want to ask you guys as well, make sense for the Toronto Blue Jays after the Isiah Kiner-Falefa signing? Obviously, you wouldn't think that signing Isiah Kiner-Falefa in a nutshell would stop them from signing a guy like Matt Chapman, but at the same time, you also don't really want to maybe bring Matt, it would lower Isiah Kiner-Falefa's value a ton. And when you look at past April, both Isiah Kiner-Falefa and Chapman had the same OPS, or a similar OPS, is not that much different, and they're both phenomenal defenders. Chapman's probably a little bit of a better defender throughout his career, more reliable. But when you're looking at these guys, do you think that now they think the Blue Jays, Ross Atkins that is, and Mark Shapiro and ownership think that the Giants are going to be the ones to make a higher bid and outbid the Jays for Matt Chapman? So they pivoted to Isiah Kiner-Falefa early, so they're not stuck with nothing. They think they can unlock something out of him, and then ultimately they stick with Kiner-Falefa instead of Matt Chapman, who's been kind of average since coming to the Blue Jays, never posting an OPS above 757. Obviously, the big difference here is that Matt Chapman's ceiling is much higher than Isiah Kiner-Falefa's, but I mean, they both have pretty similar floors. But that'll wrap it up. Let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are on all this. Let me know what your thoughts are on Matt Chapman. Do you want him to return? Are you starting to open up to the Isiah Kiner-Falefa signing? And what are your thoughts on a big move potentially coming? Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.